So folks, once again, New Japan Pro Wrestling started off its new year by ending the old and bringing in the new. Wrestle Kingdom, that Wrestle Dynasty this year, and of course New Year's Dash are all a thing of the past now. Leaves a lot to still nonetheless to talk about, to dig into, to think about in regards to the future, as well as to what all of this could also mean. So since it's the kind of stuff that you always like to do with a pal, with a chum, with a friend, well, I didn't have any available, so I called Chris Samsa from the sportofprowrestling.com, who took pity, because I think it's one of your New Year's resolution, right? To work with the unfortunate in 2025, right?
I don't know about all that. I'm happy to be here, MrWarrenHayes. So I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate I appreciate any chance to talk to anyone of your stature about New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'm all in on that. So I'm pleased to be here.
No, I of course I was kidding. I'm thrilled that you're here as well, Chris. You're always one of my favorite people to talk New Japan with. It's always a good time. And you've got a great brain for it for multiple reasons, for all the stuff that you just basically know, and all that you do as well, supplying all those juicy stats for the commentary team. But 2024 was, I think it would be safe to say that it was at the very least an interesting year for New Japan Pro Wrestling, one that maybe a lot would consider to be, right in the core issues of maybe a restructure. I don't know exactly how you call it. I've been on the podcast, I've been talking about rejuvenation quite a bit. There's a lot of issues that sort of came to surface. How do you feel like, we don't necessarily have to, dive into the entire 2024, but how do you feel about how things went in 2024 for New Japan?
It feels like a year that was sort of in two acts, maybe. The first half of the year was really disjointed. A lot happening. A lot happening behind the scenes, a lot happening in front of the scenes. You had guys like, it's funny, I mentioned this to someone else the other day. I was like, earlier this year, there was a period of time where Matt Riddle and Nick Nemeth were two singles title holders in New Japan. And it feels like that was eons ago. Just decades ago. Last year's Wrestle Kingdom, 2024's Wrestle Kingdom, Sonata was the champion coming into the main event. That feels like it was so long ago. But that was just 1 year ago. So this year, everything pre G1 feels like an eternity ago. And then everything G1 on this year feels like a part of what's happening right now. It feels like that was really when, whether it's some booking direction or some office direction, things like that, if that all kind of came together and began with this past year's G1. And it does feel like from then on, we've been at least on a linear path and less of a roller coaster. So with that said, I think Wrestle Kingdom, so the January 4th show this year, landed for those of us who pay really close attention to New Japan, that was the show for us. That was our show. Yeah. Right. And for the global wrestling economy, we'll call it, right? Wrestle Dynasty, with AEW's involvement, a little dip a toe in from CMLL and ROH, some sprinklings of some others. That was the show that really highlighted New Japan's role in the greater pro wrestling universe, right? And I think that for the people that are more attentive to, be it American pro wrestling or just pro wrestling as a whole, maybe that was the show for them, right? So we had two pretty major events in a very large building that has a lot of stature in the pro wrestling universe, and I think that combined, those two shows kind of represented what New Japan is, what New Japan brings to the table for for pro wrestling. So be it, in their silo and then out of their silo. So it was an interesting weekend for sure. I think there was a lot to like about it. There was a lot to analyze about it. But yeah, I mean, the year as a whole really always builds to those moments. But I do feel like that was a little, I want to say, truncated, right? It was a little shorter this year because the first half of the year was so. I feel like this Wrestle Kingdom compared to 2025's Wrestle Kingdom or Wrestle Kingdom weekend compared to 2024's Wrestle Kingdom, they're almost separate worlds. It's almost like we started a whole new, what do they call them in the Marvel world? Is it a phase?
Yeah, phase, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so it feels like we've moved out of a phase and into a whole different phase. And that, to me, there's some excitement and some trepidation around that for sure.
Of course, because that's the very issue of new things. Like, you're excited at the prospect of something different coming, but also, the unknown. Well, that's why humans fear many things, is because,
of course,
it's because of the unknown. So, well, since we're already on the subject, talking about the Wrestle Kingdom weekend, we're going to talk about it. But just to clarify, this is not going to be a review, right? We're mostly going to talk about maybe some bigger picture stuff, or some things that specifically from the shows we want to talk about. But we're not going to break down each of the matches. We're not doing a comprehensive review. I've already done my own reviews last week. You've probably had an opportunity to do it elsewhere as well. So let's get to it, Len. Let's start talking about the Wrestle Kingdom weekend. And I'd like to start with something actually that you shared on Twitter, which is and I already talked about this in one of the reviews, because I thought it was fascinating. You shared some notes from Takaki Kadani's interview that he gave with Tokyo Sports, a brief interview, but nonetheless, there was some stuff to glean out of there. First of all, the first thing that he talked about was the attendance, confirming that Wrestle Kingdom had attracted 24,107 people, and Wrestle Dynasty did 16,300. And he did not hide his disappointment in this, a rare and refreshing level of candor from a high-level executive. So that was very interesting. So he flat out said it was disappointing and said, next year we're doing this again, but we need to pack this with 40,000 people next year. Out the gate, how do you feel about these? How do you feel about his thoughts right out the gate?
Sure. I mean, I think the number for Wrestle Kingdom, January 4th, wasn't all that surprising. It was about 12% down from last year. But in the range of what they've kind of been up to since coming back from the pandemic, really, for some true. I mean, so
it's a dip though. It's a dip.
It's a dip. It's a dip from last year. It's a dip from the year prior, which was somewhere in the 26,000 range. Also, so for me, that little threshold that would have felt a little better would have been 25,000, right? Because then to me that's the floor. Right, so that's the floor for Wrestle Kingdom, and honestly, pretty healthy floor if you really think through it. Right, if you look historically, I think I said it on Twitter to somebody asked, someone who I know and appreciate and respect asked, how do you contextualize this number? And I said, if we are only ever comparing anything anyone does to their absolute peak, we will never have any joy in anything, right? Sure. And I am not a business analyst by any means. I can dissect some numbers, and I'm sure everyone can recognize that. But the difference in 900 tickets is both significant and insignificant at this scale, right? Sure. So, 24,107. I mean, we're not entering the dark ages here.
No, we've seen worse. Absolutely.
We have definitely seen worse. And it's a shame that this particular Wrestle Kingdom is the one in the cycle that landed on a Saturday. Because, traditionally a Saturday Wrestle Kingdom will probably draw relatively well. But, it's a holiday in Japan, and it's a part of the winter holiday break. That's why you see a lot of Japanese companies running pretty large scale shows during this time. It's not necessarily just because it's around Wrestle Kingdom. It's not like a WrestleMania situation. It's because it's holiday season now in Japan.
Sure.
And people are available. So, there's a reason that you can pack the dome on January 4th reliably, no matter what day of the week it is. With all that said, that number, disappointing, but within the range of things that I think we could expect given the card, the roster, and the trends right now with New Japan. I mean, they had a slightly up attendance for 2024 over 2023. But I mean, it was basically flat, right? If you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's a flat line for 2 years straight then. And that's honestly pretty good considering the talent that left. And the talent that wasn't in big tournaments like the G1, right?
Mm-hmm.
We actually saw like a roster turnover this year. To some extent, to a pretty large extent. So, and then when you look at the next night, 16-3 for Wrestle Dynasty, which was really a Sunday afternoon show in Japan, which is not unusual. I mean, that's something that we see a lot of. I particularly enjoy it because it lands the show at a good time for all of us.
Much better for us. Much better for us.
Yes. Totally okay. Keep doing the Sundays. Yeah, you got to look at that and say that's not what they were trying to accomplish here. 16,000 in the Tokyo Dome, with partner promotions coming in. But, I don't culturally, I don't know that stuff lands the same there.
You mean
I think it's pretty clear it doesn't. As compared to when it happens in the US. It's less of a novelty too. Because here, when it happens, it blows people's mind, right? Think about the first Forbidden Door.
Sure.
It was like, oh my God, an American company working directly and outwardly with another company, like just mind-blowing stuff. And that type of stuff has happened in Japan forever.
Mm-hmm.
And usually with, other domestic partners. I mean, New Japan's had some great drawing shows with Noah, and the United Japan Pro Wrestling stuff that has had some really great drawing shows, better than I expected even. So, so you have to look at that show and say, if AEW wants to get a stronghold in Japan via the relationship with New Japan, then the approach needs to be a little bit more consistent, I think.
Do you because I agree, like with the concept of it, joint promotion shows is it's a little more common in Japan. It's not as like you said, you use the right word, it's not as novel here. Do you think that AEW let me turn this another way. The exposure that AEW gets in Japan is not that great. Like outside of, as far as my understanding goes, outside of getting 2-week delay show AEW shows on New Japan World, right? Because I think it's a week or it's 2 weeks, something like that, right? Aside getting the shows on New Japan World, there's really nothing else. So, the compelling part of an AEW going there, I feel is much more a thing to attract American eyeballs than the opposite, than really generating interest from locals. Do you think that there's even, like you said it yourself, that New Japan AEW has to be a little more consistent in the Japanese territory do you think there's even room for them to do that? Because look, I mean, the established promotions are all struggling. Like none of them are doing well, right? We talk about it often. New Japan is the only one that's thriving, and even they're not, it's not numbers that we've seen them do regularly in the past. Like how does New Japan get? AEW? How do they get in there and take a piece of the pie without taking that slice of the pie away from someone else. Also.
Sure. I mean, I think they have a lot of the toppings to their slice of pie already. Be it the guys who used to work there, and are very much still established stars. I think there's some strategy as to why those guys weren't on this card.
I agree.
I mean, that seems so obvious to me, and I know there's a lot of criticism going around about that, but I do think if you're not just trying to pop a number, right, and that number being attendance in the Tokyo Dome, because we're not talking about TV ratings here. If you're not just trying to pop a number, then you're looking at this at scale, right? You're looking at a much longer stretch of time, which is why you don't hot shot and throw, Jay White, Kazuchika Okada, Will Ospreay, among others, honestly, onto this show. I mean, and they absolutely could have done that, and it would have outdrawn Wrestle Kingdom potentially. It would have outdrawn the night prior, or gotten right up there with it, because that's a different audience.
Sure.
I mean, we saw it last year. Bryan Danielson got a huge reaction in the Tokyo Dome. And that wasn't because he was fighting Kazuchika Okada. It was because he's Bryan Danielson. And he's an established dude, and WWE, for all their, for all the reasons I don't like WWE, they have had a presence in Japan, at least on the surface, for a long time. They go and run, mid-sized big buildings and do pretty well there. So that product is a product that people pay attention to from the perspective of being an important product in the world of pro wrestling. And AEW they've never run their own shows. They've got the talent, right? They've got guys like Okada. Not to mention the Joshi side of things. That they've always had a pretty significant hand in. So in less of a they work for us now, but in more of a partnership world, the Joshi side of things has always been important to AEW. So is there space for it? Yeah. But I do think they need to do it. They almost need to do a little bit more on their own before they kind of attach their wagon back to New Japan in Japan again. But I don't really think that's the plan. And I don't really know what that looks like either, because AEW, they do a great job with what they do. But they are very much a television company. They're a TV show company, and New Japan is not. Yeah. It's just not how they operate. And WWE also is a television pro wrestling company, and that's a whole different presentation when it comes to how it lands, I think, to Japanese audiences and on Japanese television. I don't even know if they look at it like it's the same thing, because it is so disparate in how it is presented. So
those are good points. Yeah, those are very good points.
Yeah, and I don't know how you get to where they want to go, I guess, is sure. That luckily it's not up to me. So
but I the point you're making is very salient, and it's something that I actually hadn't thought about. And it all boils down to, like you said, do they want to do it? Because they have the means to do it. They have the means to do it. They have the talent to do it, because they could easily run any of the usual buildings. They could run Sumo Hall. They could run Corkin if they wanted, and they bring in Okada. They bring in Lance Archer. They bring in bring back Ricochet. I thought Ricochet got some pretty good reactions from the Japanese audience. Just bring those folks back and have your little AEW shows tailored for Japan, and bring Jon Moxley back. They know who Jon Moxley is.
Moxley was the champion for New Japan like 6 months ago. I mean, so that's the person that's missing from this show that leads me to believe this is on purpose. They intentionally did not stack the deck on this show. I don't know if they have some sort of long-term plan for what they want to do on the next one, the next time they try this, or if it's just how all the chips landed. Sometimes things come together late, and guys at that level are not they're not available the same way you would expect them to be. So yeah,
No,
but they've got the tools in the toolkit. So it's up to them to put the tools in the right places.
because they do want to do this again. At least if we're listening to Kidani, right? Who specifically spoke about that it would be that he'd like to run a show again, because he said, if I'm reading from your notes again that you provided on the Everything app, Kidani suggests that it might be more beneficial to hold another joint show with AEW in Japan, but at a time further removed from January 4th. So to me, that he's clearly associating the lack of ticket sales overall probably to having these two events be so close to each other. I think he sees a benefit to running another joint show with AEW a little more removed from Wrestle Kingdom, and maybe have a little more people buy tickets for Wrestle Kingdom proper, and boost those numbers to a degree. Although I would assume that if you're going to night 1, you're going to night 2 at this point,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a fair.
The opposite, actually. If you're going to night 2, right?
You're going to night 1.
Yeah.
My bet is 95% of that 16,000 that went to night 2 was also in the building for night 1.
I agree.
I would imagine that very few people were just there for night 2. Maybe the biggest Kenny Omega fans that are stuck with,
Sure.
He was the one guy that I think maybe someone was like, damn, now I got to buy a ticket to the Dome, and they're only going on the 5th, right? And that's not to say he doesn't have quite a few people that would do that for him. Sure. He is certainly a humongous draw everywhere he goes right now at this point. So I think it's hard to run 2 nights in a row anywhere. And I think New Japan has learned that the hard way over the last 3 or 4 years when they've tried that in a lot of their different Japanese markets, including the Tokyo Dome during the pandemic, really heart of the pandemic stuff when they, brought in a couple of thousand people, but they could have had many, many more because that is such a large space and, social distancing and all that. Words I haven't used in years here in America, but
vernacular has changed so much. It's kind of it's like a throwback now.
I was like, what did we call that when people had to stay away from each other?
Social distancing.
Social distancing and clap crowds. So, there's a lot of stories about why they booked 2 nights at the Dome. It was a Saturday and a Sunday. Y'all can find that elsewhere. I don't need to, perpetrate all that too much further than it has already gone. But I also think if you do it separate from Wrestle Kingdom, then you can get some different talent on Wrestle Kingdom. Because I look at the Wrestle Kingdom card now, and if I drop in Gabe versus Kenny somewhere on that card near that semi-main spot, that's a hell of a show. You've got
people's interest straight off the bat. Like that's a net positive from these shows moving forward, right?
Right.
I really saw this in the same vein of Tanahashi working with Okada back in the day, where he's like, I'm working with a new guy, but this is going to be a guy I'll be able to feud with moving forward and draw some money with, and that's absolutely a net positive that came out of that. Despite the fact that Kirani felt again in his comments that maybe the atmosphere could benefit from having a little more of a rivalry between the promotions. That's something that he mentioned as well. But I feel like we're going to talk about that a little later as well. So we'll just put
it's front of mind today as we're recording.
Yeah, pretty much. But peek behind the curtain. We're recording this on Monday on January 6th. So I'll let you put that timeline together. But the last thing that he mentioned that I'd like to talk about, before we get into the shows overall, let me start that over. Konosuke Takeshita, after his Wrestle Dynasty match, said, "Yeah, I have a 1-year contract with New Japan," and everyone everyone was kind of excited, and I was like, okay, work, it's like, you always have that little barrier up. You're like, well, is this the thing? But then Kidani in the interview said exactly that. He said that he believed that, if you remember correctly, something to that effect, that Kensuke Takeshita did indeed sign a 1-year contract with New Japan Pro Wrestling, which I guess makes him the first pro wrestler, at least in modern history, to have a contract with 3 professional wrestling companies at once, because we can't forget DDT and all of this. And yeah, so, he left the weekend still as never openweight champion, won the title, and is still, he's flown back to North America. That's very interesting. Soft jumps happen also a lot in Japan. It happens frequently, but you don't see that very often relating to a North American company because of how contracts are set up. But they really, they being New Japan, I feel like they did pretty much everything they could to entice him over, to sort of, like they gave him the great G1 run. They invited him back and to have, he's just been involved in great matches. They give him the title shot, title for title against Shingo, then the next night against Ishii. And, there were rumors flying around earlier in 2024 that Kensuke wasn't exactly enchanted with how he was being handled in AEW. So all of this kind of coming together, and it's very interesting that Kidani mentioned that, because just to be clear, that automatically destroys the concept that this is a work, right? Kidani is a suit. He doesn't work for New Japan. He works for Bushiroad, right? So like he's not in this environment. He's got no business like playing it up for the audience, right? For the fans, and just so we're kind of moving into territory where, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This, or at least this is actually the thing that's happening. And he outright said, hey, if you ever want to come here and work full time, you can work here more on top of that, brother. It's like, this is fascinating to me. Like, for as far as soft jumps go, don't you feel that this is kind of where we're heading towards?
Yeah, I mean, it feels a lot like Ibushi, right? I mean, sort of. I mean, it's different because he's got this AEW component in it.
That's the issue. That's the thing. It's like the American aspect with the way, like I said, with the way contracts are done, they're very rigid and so on and so forth.
Yes.
I hear AEW's a terrible partner, but yet lets one of its wrestlers go and sign with another partner. I don't know.
There were a bunch of folks on that Wrestle Dynasty show that have AEW contracts. And I do think there's a range of AEW contracts when it comes to exclusivity.
Sure.
And I think there's a range of where things are exclusive and what needs to cross the desk of the powers that be at AEW and what doesn't. And I don't know. Takeshita clearly has had a deal with DDT forever. So maybe the deal with DDT is what kept his contract with AEW from being super exclusive, because AEW's priority was probably to get him on the roster. But he had some sort of probably multi-year deal with DDT. Mm-hmm. So because of that deal, potentially that opened the door for the AEW contract, which in turn potentially accidentally opened the door back to New Japan. Or there's a chance that this whole thing is a big strategic maneuver from everyone, potentially, right? I mean, from everyone involved. DDT probably knows he's got greener pastures to go run in, but they don't want to cut ties with him. New Japan wants him. I mean, clearly wants him,
that's no longer up for debate. That's no longer up for debate.
And I don't, even when he went in from the G1, and my understanding with the G1 piece was that was a last minute thing as a replacement for somebody else. And I don't remember who. I honestly don't know if I ever knew who. But it makes sense because he then had to um they had to modify his match schedule so that he could wrestle on Peter Pan. So
That's right.
he wrestled I think he was in the B block and he had to wrestle one of his matches on an A block night so that he could go and wrestle in Peter Pan, which led me to believe that this was not a long-term plan. He was coming in as a sort of a last minute thing, and I'm sure he was, based on everything I know, he was thrilled to do it because his dream was to wrestle in New Japan at some point. And we've seen this before a little bit in a way. We saw it with Shingo. We saw Shingo leave Dragon Gate, do some time as a freelancer, champion Carnival with All Japan, and dipping his toe in a bunch of different places, and then boom, pops up in New Japan, right? And now he's a staple there. Now he's a little later in his career than someone like Takeshita, who's very early in his career and could really still have a huge run at the top in Japan. But in Japan, where the top company goes, so goes the industry. So that's not to say, and the soft jump thing is more of a cultural thing there, based on how employment works there. Like, people don't jump around and job hop in Japan, and that comes back to pro wrestling as well. Just in a kind of how things go culturally. So, with that said, it feels very familiar. It feels very familiar to Shingo, to Sonata, to some of these guys who they go do something else for just a little while and then they land where they want to land, which, right now the biggest company that's, fully functional is New Japan. Even Kenta, right? Kenta left Noah, went to New Japan, went to WWE. Hideo Itami had a run, doing God knows what, and I watched him break Brian Kendrick's nose in Chicago, which was fun. On Christmas, mind you, on Christmas.
There you go.
Doing a go to sleep, which I'm sure he wasn't supposed to do in Chicago anyway. But long story short, he landed back in New Japan, and now maybe we'll talk about Kenta later. But he's up to some other stuff. So, it's a familiar thing to like do a gap year, I guess you could call it, in your career. You go to America, you go to Europe, you go to, wherever else wrestling happens, and then you come back and you land in wherever you want to land. And Takeshita does sort of feel like that's what's happening. And, I think there's a lot of people that hope that's what's happening. And DDT may be, in tune enough to say, well, if New Japan does well, we will do better, and have the same size piece of a larger pie, if we want to go back to the pie thing. So there's a chance that they kind of see the forest through the trees in that way, which would be kind of an honorable thing.
I agree, and I'm pretty sure they'd benefit from having Konosuke Takeshita being closer as well. Probably be able to show up a little more often. But yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I can't help but feel like, like you said, like there's a lot of strategic maneuvering that could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Takeshita is just going to, is waiting for his AEW contract to be up to just make the full jump, or it, like Tony, this, like you said, it could be just a good old strategic play by AEW who says, look, we'll let you work your home promotions, and there are partners on top of that. Well, at least they do have the relationship with DDT that was yeah.
There, I mean, even recently Jericho popped up in DDT, and
they get along well. So maybe AEW is like, well, why don't you stick around? You'll work our dates, you'll work their dates, and it'll probably consecrate the fact that it'll never be a top guy in AEW. But there's spots, and like Konosuke Takeshita can absolutely be a top guy in New Japan. Like, he can be a tippy top guy in New Japan. They need him more than a lot of other guys they have on their roster right now.
Well, and here's what I look at with Takeshita. part of AEW's talent pipeline is Japan.
Yes.
Seems very clear, right?
Yes.
Like, and I don't say that with the parentheses and derogatory. I say that as just, it's part of what they do.
Yes. Sure.
And I think generally that's a positive for the pro wrestling industry and for Japan for that matter. Could they do it a little more spaced out? Yes. That I would appreciate that. We all would. On this side of the coin.
Sidebar.
But I think they're going to need that pipeline to stay full and to continue to compete in the pro wrestling universe that they exist in. And I think if Takeshita were to go full-time New Japan, he's at the top of the card almost immediately. And I think there's a long ace run on the table for Takeshita in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Long being like
that. Sure.
Okada length, maybe not like God of Pro Wrestling forever, right? As people, see Okada, but very strong, top of the card, long run with New Japan on the table. Like it's ripe for the picking. He's the perfect person to slot in there. And I think even then, because of their familiarity, maybe he does that for 5 years and then he pops back up in AEW. And it's like Okada popping up. And it's like, Ospreay making the jump, right? Like there is so much value in that to both companies.
Sure.
And if that's what's happening, then that's an honorable move from all. And I think that there's a part of me that feels like that's the path. And damn, do I want to see it.
That would be awesome.
New Japan does not have a roster issue. They have a main eventer, top of the card challenge, because the top of their card jumped. And they were not soft jumps, as we can see. They were very hard, and they have sustained. So
yeah, and their main eventers either left or they can't go anymore. That's the issue.
Right.
That's the main issue with the top of the card. So yeah, you throw in a guy like him, holy smokes. Like it changes it changes everything.
And all of a sudden you've got a big boss. And domestic, right? I think they do have,
and domestic.
Zack Sabre Jr. is a great big boss, right? For an international pro wrestling company, which is a lane that New Japan operates in. He's not a domestic star that you can put on Japanese game shows and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And people in Japan, I think they want to see Japanese folks at the top of their pro wrestling companies. And I think that's a little bit of why, night 2 of Wrestle Kingdom weekend, Wrestle Dynasty, drew the way it did. It drew the way it did with 2 foreigners on top. Sure. And it's a main event country. Japan is a main event country. The main event is the poster. It's not but the bones are there. And the Takeshita thing is a huge piece to the puzzle. And if that's how it all plays out, then I think everything's going to be A-okay for everyone involved.
I think so too. Yeah. I'm be curious to see how all of this shakes out in a couple of months, a year. We'll see.
I mean, if he's in this year's G1, that tells us something too.
Sure. Yeah.
That he's here to go. Because that's the tournament that puts your body on the line. And if you're giving your body to that level as a roster member, then that there's some long-term stuff going on.
Let's talk about the shows a little more. Wrestle Kingdom, Wrestle Dynasty. I think the consensus overall is that Wrestle Dynasty was a clearly better show from top to bottom. A lot of people are dragging Wrestle Kingdom in that regard. I don't necessarily agree. I didn't hate Wrestle Kingdom 19. I really did. I thought it was a good show. It's just a show that lacked pizzazz, for lack of a better word. It didn't have anything outright great. But overall, it was a good show. It had its problems. And it comes with the Wrestle Kingdom label, right? So then you have the automatic expectations that kick in, which is fine, because that's what you as a wrestling company want when you create, your premium show, your WrestleMania, so to speak. You're coming in with the pretense that this is going to be a show that's going to blow your mind, that's going to be great, and when it's not, well, I think folks have an easier tendency to discard it and poo-poo on it, whereas when you look at it objectively, you're like, this was a good show. I didn't have an issue with the show in and about itself, outside of the fact that a Wrestle Kingdom shouldn't be a good show. It should be a great show. What did you think?
Yeah, and I've said this privately, but I enjoyed Wrestle Dynasty like I enjoy an AEW pay-per-view, which is like, it's a little frantic. There's a lot happening, not a lot of connective tissue throughout the show, because everything sort of feels like a segment, as opposed to being a part of a whole. I think the top match for the weekend, the two top matches for the weekend, happened on Wrestle Dynasty.
Sure.
So, Gabe Kidd and Kenny Omega, which I just think was just stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a Gabe Kidd believer from the beginning.
Oh, same.
Yeah. I mean, like, a lot of people thought he needed to figure, and he did. He had to come back to earth a little bit on some of the stuff he was working on, but, sometimes you got to workshop a character for a little while, and he did, and he found his lane, and he's been great. Right. And I think, Kenny was a great foil for that. And there's a lot happening in the Gabe Kidd world. And I think it's really neat. The Bullet Club guy coming out with the lion mark on his shorts,
tremendous.
like the pop and the swell. And that's Tokyo Dome shows. Pop is a weird word to use on a Tokyo Dome show, because how you hear the sound is kind of from the ring out, and like, it's this swell of sound, and it's a whole different audio experience if you're watching watch any Tokyo Dome show. And that's how any of these kind of big moments, they swell. It becomes this like small sound that goes big, and eventually it's this thing, and it's such a neat thing. And the best one that happened this weekend was when the people saw the side of Gabe Kidd's tights, which they must have had the tight shot on one of the big screens, because all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, and it got bigger and bigger, as big as it can get with 16,000 people in that building. And that was such a neat moment. But and then obviously the other great match over the weekend was Takeshita and Ishii, which was
just fantastic.
Just tremendous.
It's the kind of stuff these are kind of the matches that years ago got me into New Japan, right? When you see Shibata and Ishii, right? That kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Like, this was, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, this is exactly why I love pro wrestling.
Right.
This is exactly it. It's no nonsense. It's two guys just beating the piss out of each other for my enjoyment.
Yes.
And I appreciate it.
And it's what everyone wanted out of the Shingo match the night before, and it didn't quite get there. And it has started a little bit of conversation about the difference between Shingo and Ishii, because a lot of people put them in the same category. I do not put them in the same category. I think that Ishii is special. Shingo is special, but Ishii is a different kind of special. Willing and giving and emotional, and he'll draw it out of the person that is against him, even if he is stoic. And Shingo is a fantastic physical professional wrestler. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you had flip-flopped those matches, it would have been equally great. But I mean, the Ishii, the in-ring on Wrestle Dynasty had two higher peaks, but I do think the connective tissue of a full show, I think Wrestle Kingdom was a better whole show. So if I'm thinking like show of the year, and I'm not a match rating guy, so I don't add up my stars and say this match had a better average or whatever. Like I felt better at the end of Wrestle Kingdom than I did it at the end of Wrestle Dynasty. Whereas Wrestle Dynasty, I am way more likely to go back and rewatch a couple of matches on that show. So Wrestle Dynasty had the better segments, I guess. Whereas Wrestle Kingdom, I think as a whole, was more of a and on my end, like I'm a New Japan guy, right? So and I watch AEW, I watch all the shows, I watch all the pay-per-views, but Wrestle Kingdom felt big from top to bottom, whereas the roller coaster was heavier on Wrestle Dynasty. I think both of those shows have a lane for pro wrestling fans, though. Wrestle Dynasty was catered towards non-domestic Japanese fans. I mean, like it was catered towards Americans and people in the UK and people English speaking, I guess, audiences, and I think they hit the mark on both of them. And I think Wrestle Kingdom had a couple of moments that dragged down the card.
I was gonna say, yeah, there's a couple of spots. There's the Doki injury that comes to mind, and I feel it really sucked the energy out of the room.
It's really unfortunate, and clearly those guys were go in for like a 12-minute sprint. I don't know, it was going to be a sprint.
It was going to be a hard one too. It was it was very disappointing. But it really sucks for Doki overall, as opposed to us who are just here lamenting we didn't get a match. It sucks a lot more for Doki. And the Tetsuya Naito Hiromu Takahashi match, man. I mean, a lot of us were, quietly maybe amongst ourselves, maybe not as public about it, but a lot of us were worried about the match, and we were saying 5 years too late. And boy, were we right. This one was 5 years too late.
Yeah, this one sucked to be right about, but I was even semi-publicly saying that because I believed it.
I think there's a lot. Well, okay, like from me, I'm a big Tetsuya Naito fan. Okay, I have this stuff. I have the hat right over there somewhere. Like it's like I'm a big Tetsuya Naito fan. So I'm self-aware enough to know that there's always a little part of me that wants to believe that big match Naito is still there, that he can pull out the magic Stardust one more time, and just. When he teased doing the Stardust press in the Hiromu match, I was like, oh my God, like, okay, like there's 0.5 stars more if he's actually doing this, right? But no, it was a tease. He can, like, that's the point. It's, and I'm not like delusional to the point where I'm letting it cloud my vision. I'm like, no, this is going to be great. I had so many apprehensions. I just wanted to believe that I didn't want to go so hard on it in the lead up, although I was being logical about it, but I didn't want to go so hard because I think somewhere inside I'm like, this is Tetsuya Naito. It's one of the greatest to ever do it. So much about his story and so on. It's like everything would make sense for him to come out, wrestle his buddy, and just have like one final mind-boggling performance that you're like, okay, there you go, and now you can move on to your Valhalla, sir, like kind of thing. But it just really wasn't the case, and it was really, really, really disappointing. It was a very deflating match, and I think the crowd felt it as well. I think the crowd felt it as well. And I understand why they did it too. I think there are, again, this is something that's been brought up multiple times. I think they felt they had to do it. One, because if not now it'll really be never if they didn't do it now. And it probably was the drawing match of the show. Like otherwise, what else, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
What did you think of the match?
I'm trying not to think of the match. That's sort of where I'm at. And I'm not a Naito person. All the respect in the world. And I loved watching his story really play out when it did. But I think I've been too close to the decline of his physical well-being and seeing it for so often. And like I look at the numbers, right? Like this man wrestled, I mean, I think the second most matches behind Bushi in 2024. for New Japan, and the most ring time, like the most total ring time, including like all the shows that he had to make it to, and right up there for the singles matches too. Not quite first, but top 3. I mean, I've watched a lot of Tetsuya Naito in the last 5, 6, 7 years. From really, I think his peak in 2016 to 2018 till now, it's pretty clear this man is on, he's on a path to, and he has been ridden like a donkey. He hasn't really had a down cycle year in quite a while. Besides the year he got hurt during the G1. Sure. And that might have just saved him something. But Tanahashi had a couple of down cycle years, and then it continued to just down cycle to the point where now we know he's retiring.
Even Kazuchika Okada had down cycle years.
Whoa, yeah, Okada's 2020 with the money clip and whatever the balloon year was, and Naito, his trajectory was that of someone who thinks if he doesn't have a ton of output, maybe he doesn't have a spot. I mean, and that just shouldn't be the case. And I'm sure it's not the actual case, but that's how it feels from the outside looking at, just how hard he's been ridden. And, it has made sense, but it's also kind of a shame that we're not going to try to elongate this man's career. Maybe we will from here on out, tag team with Hiromu, etc. But I mean, Hiromu's no spring chicken either. So we're not looking at the youth of New Japan here, and I think Hiromu is kind of stale. I hate to say it, but like, what has he done that's like?
Isn't it wild?
Different
last year, the start of 2023, I'd say 4 or 5 months in, and he's having stellar matches. Like he had that great match with Yo, right? He had the great match with Lio Rush. And Mike Bailey on top of that. Like he was having a bomb ass year. Does that make me sound cringe to say bomb ass?
I don't know. He just hasn't. He hasn't evolved.
That's the problem.
I think, and I think there hasn't been a space for him to evolve. And again, he was carrying the junior division for a long time too, right? They kept putting the title on him. They kept putting Best of the Super Juniors on him. Like. And, the junior division now is so strong that I'm finally pointing to Hiromu and saying, sure, put him in the heavies. Like, let him go. Sure. Like, let him go do whatever he's going to do, right? Or let him, I don't know, let him go freelance, or let him have some more produce shows or whatever it may be. I mean, like the man he's a wild man. I mean, and he can be a very fun wrestler. But yeah, the match with Naito and Hiromu, ultimately it landed flat. They got to it a weird way. It didn't create this like groundswell of, wow, I got to be in the building for that. Like, I truly believe that if New Japan really thought it was a ticket buying or ticket selling drawing match, they would have put it in Ryogoku or Ota, or they would have just run it as a special match as a main event in one of those buildings, even on a show like Anniversary or something like that. Like, I truly think if they thought it was actually going to move a good amount of tickets, like a meaningful amount of tickets, thousands, into the 4 digits number of tickets for that specific match, they would have put it as a main event somewhere. And I think they knew that I don't know if Naito's got a main event in him that's not heavyweight style, which is sort of a little like an Okada main event. Sure. I think he could still do, right? Where it's this groundswell up to a couple of big moments and, you could really bring it together that way. I don't think he's got a main event in him with Hiromu. So the semi-main spot made sense. I still think that was like 3 matches too high on the card. For the expectations of what it was supposed to deliver. And it's a shame. It is, because that match would have, even in 2020, I thought that was probably a couple of years too late, but it would have been awesome. And it would have been on an Anniversary, and it would have meant something, and it would have been those 2 dudes, both as title holders. Like, it would have been a moment. Whereas
big match Naito was still around back then.
Yes.
Like, you know,
Yes.
regardless, because he was still banged up at the time. Don't get us wrong. We're not sitting here saying he was, hey, top form, peak of his career. No. We understand, but he's not as, you know, at least he's not like, you know, yarn and, you know, duct tape, you know, as he is right now.
And Lord knows what he sees with his eyes. I mean, pro wrestlers are pro wrestlers, right? So that was an on the record interview about what he saw, but there's got to be some truth in there.
But
so
let's say it is. Can you realize just how wild it is to say, yeah, I'm going to have an operation on the other eye and make the other eye's eyesight worse so that it balances out with the other one so I can see better. Like, that's just nuts. That's
like
insane.
if Naito was a dog, they would have taken the other eye out.
Pretty much,
right?
Yes.
Like that's and he would have lived a happy. I had a dog with one eye. It was a real thing. And it was fine, and it was better once he only had one eye. And I, you know, like I hate to say Naito should go like be a pirate now and just cover one up, but like maybe it would be better. I don't know.
At this point,
I don't know. I'm not a doctor, believe it or not. But yeah, I mean, so couple of deflating moments, and then, you know, it's a matter of how you felt. Wrestle Kingdom is really a matter of how you felt about the main event. If you liked Zack and Shota, or if you know, if you're a clock watcher in the way that says it went too long. I don't feel that way, but I'm used to.
Well, it did go too long.
It did.
Like, I'm not necessarily a clock watcher, but it did go too long.
They missed the mark.
Yeah.
But that match, they were really trying to get the crowd behind Shota Umino. They were trying to pull some pro wrestling magic. I think they were just trying to get the crowd to feel something about Shota Umino, and they didn't. No. And it just, so then that made it feel a little long in the tooth. I think Zack is still, for my money, the best active wrestler in the world. Sure. But he is also not Nigel McGuinness, and by that I mean he is not a magician on the side. So he could not pull this magic off.
Look, your partner just has to want it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just as simple as that. Someone, I think it was in the Slack, I don't remember, but someone shared a picture of Zack sitting on Umino's head, right? And so you have Umino's head, you know, right under Zack's ass, and there's like no expression.
He's taking a little nap.
He's just like
taking a little nap.
Looks serene to a degree, you know.
His Headspace app said it was time for a minute of mindfulness.
There you go. It just went off mid-match, and he called it in the ring. He told Zack,
like, I gotta put me in a hold, man. I gotta get my mindfulness in. Yeah, it's a shame. I had, you know, I was very pleased that Zack was the winner, because I was going around town saying, I think Shota's winning this thing, because otherwise why do you put him in the spot? Like, and I still sort of believe that. I very much believe that. Like, if Zack was just going to win the main event, why didn't they just run Naito there? But I think they're trying to blow up the calendar a little bit. And that's all fine and well. Like, a little less consistency, a little more uncertainty about who's who and what's what in New Japan, and it is a strategy. So I will allow it to be a strategy and see how it plays out. But I think if they were gonna, Zack and Naito could have had a much better match for Zack, a much better match for Draw, and a much better match for Naito.
You think so?
Yeah. I think Zack and Naito are great dance partners, and Zack wrestles a style that you can stretch a match out a lot longer without having to, you know, depending on, Naito could have depended more on his charisma than his physical, his physical state. Yeah. So, and I mean, there's yes, it would have been the rematch of all rematches. They've done that match a billion times, but it would have, people would have known. They would have known it was coming. Then you still get Naito on top at the Dome, and you don't. Hiromu is still a physical wrestler. he can get in there with all the juniors and go. He got in there with Hanare for one of the best matches of last year, right? And Naito just couldn't give Hiromu what Hiromu needed for his match. I think if you split that all up and the main event is Zack and Naito, I still think that would have probably made for a better overall perception of the card.
I kind of feel there would have been a revolt if that would have happened.
Just boring, or
well, and mostly why aren't you booking any new guys, right?
Well, there's that.
There's that, which was a point of contention, of course, moving in. It's like, why Shota, and I always anyone who came back to me with that, I always fought back. I was like, okay, well then who if not
Tsuji,
Shota,
I guess, but like and that's a great talking point too. It's like why Shota, and there's a part of me with a tinfoil hat on,
but I want to hear yours. But I have a tinfoil theory as well. Go ahead.
My tinfoil hat theory is that Yuya Uemura was supposed to win the damn G1. Be in Shota's spot, because they were really rising him through the end of that G1, and really he was in a couple of great spots. It's very, the tinfoil hat is multi-layered for that one. I mean, that is the tinfoil of all tinfoil. But I think he was supposed to be some sort of major player in the process of getting towards to Wrestle Kingdom, and I don't doubt that potentially he was supposed to win the G1, and then even then potentially Zack still could have beaten Naito on the way, and they could have done Uemura and Zack and really done a rocket strap.
Interesting.
So part of me, Yuya has been my young lion from that generation since day one. So there's a big part of me that knows that that's all up here. But it would have almost made more sense than Shota, because Shota's had this long and winding road. And then eventually, and Shota had a terrible G1, and we know that those two things, G1 and Wrestle Kingdom, are connected. I mean, Shota only won 8 singles matches all year.
Right.
There are guys that did that during the G1. And Shota just, Shota shows up and makes the challenge, and people are like, wait, what? So I think that there was a cleaner path to a different main event at Wrestle Kingdom, and I think Uemura had some role in that, or Uemura was going to be in the Tsuji spot, and Tsuji was going to,
Sure.
I think the Uemura injury threw Wrestle Kingdom's booking into a tailspin, and then somehow we got to where we are.
Okay. My tinfoil hat theory is not as tinfoil hatty, but. But I think they decided to go, first of all, with a new guy, and whether it had been Shota or Uemura would have been the same, for the same reasoning, is to, okay, well, the audience is demanding it, and we kind of have our hands tied behind our backs now because everyone's gone or no one can go anymore in our top guys, so we got to put it to, we have to put it to ourselves to make it happen. So, I think that's the basic reason why they put him up there. I think he's also because he's kind of been anointed as the guy, right? Like they even mentioned it on New Year's Dash today, like the leader of Hantai. And I'm like, wow, really?
Leader of what? Yeah, right.
Yeah. There was that, but ultimately, I think that New Japan was self-aware enough, and there was a bit of a political back and forth between the guy with the pencil and the guy, and maybe some more of the leadership who don't necessarily, I don't know who doesn't believe in who at this point and who wants to push who, but they're like, okay, sink or swim. We put him in the main event.
Sure. And
everyone agreed, shook hands, and it's like, okay, that's it. We're tossing him into the deep end. We'll see what happens. I think that's why we ended up with him, and because they looked at the landscape and they're like, okay, well, we put anyone else, we're not drawing any more money. Like we're not drawing any harder if we put Yoda there, or if we put Narita there. Bear with me, but we're not drawing any more. We're not drawing any more money than if we put Shota there, as opposed to any other of the young guys. So might as well just see what happens, right? I think that was the outcome, and I think there's I think there's a lot of people eating crow for.
Sure.
But then again, I look at New Year's Dash and I'm like, are they?
Well, right, because still part of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
not an immediate down cycle, at least.
Nope.
Yeah. So I think I'm sure there's some of that, right? I mean, like it was absolutely a sink or swim situation. It was a huge risk, and they took it, and we got what we got, right? But I was fearful. Well, I'm fearful is probably overblowing it, but I really did think Shota was winning because foreigners don't win the main event at the Tokyo Dome. Like they just don't.
Yeah.
Brock. I mean, there's 5 now, and Zach's a part of that conversation.
What? Bob Sapp, Lesnar.
Bob Sapp, Lesnar, Hogan.
Hogan. Yeah. Okay. Who's
who
the
am I missing?
Guy?
The first guy, the Russian, Ukrainian.
Oh yeah,
the guy who he faced Inoki. Shota.
I can't remember his name, but yes.
I don't want to even try to say his name because I don't want to offend anybody. But yes, so and even that's mixed bag of how you count that with Inoki and all that timeline. The late 80s were rough.
Sure.
Late 80s were a weird time for a lot of places in the world. But so I mean that's rarefied air for Zach, and Zach is the real deal. He loves living in Japan. He loves being part of the culture. He loves New Japan Pro Wrestling. So it makes sense that they would give him the opportunity to be one of those on that list. So and it works. But
makes sense.
Makes
sense. A lot more sense than Bob Sapp.
A lot more sense than Bob Sapp. Probably not more sense than Hogan or Lesnar for that matter. Bob Sapp. Great for what he was.
Exactly.
Bob Sapp had a look.
And a great music video too on top of that.
So I thought I was like, why would they do all this wacky, convoluted way to get there if Shota's not winning? But then Shota didn't win, which I think by mid-match, to me, it was pretty clear that there was no comeback sequence that was going to get what they wanted out of the Shota Umino experience. So we'll see where it goes from here. But excited that Zach's first post Wrestle Kingdom challenger is Hiroki Goto, because that's fun for everyone.
That is fun. Honest to God, that is fun. I don't think I can't see how anyone can be disappointed about that. Seriously. Nah. And the people, Chris, they love the Hiroki Goto, don't they?
They love the Hiroki Goto.
When he came out at the Ranbo, he got a big reaction. He got the biggest reaction of anyone who came out at the Ranbo. He wins. The people are cheering. He comes out today at Dash. People are Goto immediately.
I'm not ruling out him winning.
It's a very interesting
main event,
to say the least.
If you want the people to get behind New Japan, I think maybe you throw the title on Goto. He cannot hold it very long.
Well, look,
but if you need a transitional reign, he's the perfect transitional reign.
This is the moment of the year where you do this kind of stuff, because once you hit Dominion, you're locked in at that point, right? At Dominion, you have the guy that you want down the road, right? For January. So this is the perfect time to do it. And something at New Beginning, and hey, he can drop it at Sakura Genesis. That's not a big deal. It's really not that big a deal.
And you know who's a great Ryogoku headliner? Hiroki Goto. You know who's not a great Tokyo Dome headliner? Hiroki Goto. So if you're gonna do it, you do it right now. Zach drops the title. Goto drops it to the next white guy, honestly. Because rarely does the title go from foreigner to foreigner, too, right? So, true. And I think they know that they don't have a fresh domestic talent ready unless they want to, really go for something. But I think Goto beats Zach. David Finlay maybe wins the New Japan Cup. David Finlay beats Goto. David Finlay carries the belt for a little while. Somehow you build up whoever, right? Like that can be real. And usually they do that with Jay White or AJ Styles or whoever, right? They've done that a lot with the Foreigner, but they could do it the opposite way they've done it with Tanahashi too. Tanahashi sort of had Tanahashi, it went Omega, Tanahashi, Jay White, right?
Sure. Yes.
Then back to Okada, right? So somehow, some way, they like to bounce it back and forth between Foreigner, domestic. So, I love the Zach reign. I don't think Zach needs a year and a half long reign though. I think the right move might be, and also just for the feel good moment, put his kids in the crowd again, right? You do the whole thing. You bring the kids up to Osaka. He wins the title.
And then
he walks around.
And then he loses it to like you said, to Dave Finlay again. Like he loses.
Well, and the Finlay and Goto, they're kind of intertwined because Goto got that New Japan run because Finlay got sick or injured, and that Finlay could just come out and say that was supposed to be my spot, and I was gonna win the damn title. I would have had the title all year. Finlay could make it as big as he wants to make it.
I was mostly thinking of Goto bringing his kids back to see him fight Finlay again, and then Finlay makes his daughter cry again. Like it was more like around.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a ton of callbacks to have in that whole story, and it's like a gift. It's like right on the platter, unless they really want Goto to never hold that title. But I just don't think that's a line in the sand that they should stick with right now. I think Goto can still go.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he had some great matches.
He understands the mandate of his spot. Whenever he's put in these spots, he understands it's time to deliver, right? And we've seen it. There's guys who are put in the spots and don't get it. But Goto gets it. He 100% gets it. He's going to be like, okay, it's time to deliver, just like he did in the G1. Just like he did in the G1 again this year, right? Where you're like, oh, it's Hiroki Goto. And then at some point in the tournament, we're going, holy shit, is he winning this? Right? We're going to go like, oh my God. So, another point I think where it might make sense is, look, I think there might be a few more tickets sold to events where Hiroki Goto is the champion, is at the top of the card.
He's an established guy.
And probably a little more than Zach. I don't think Zach's drawing record is stellar.
Yeah, it's not bad, but it's not. He's not blowing the roof off the places, right?
Not at 16. Not at 16,300 in the dome.
Sure.
But I think Hiroki Goto's got something there. I think we have something.
There's something there. My fingers are very crossed that they run with it. Give him his moment. And make another person out of it, right? Make a David Finlay, or even one of the younger guys, right? Like Goto can carry anyone to a great match.
Finlay makes so much sense.
Oh yeah,
because he did not lose to go middle back down on the mid card. He lost up.
Especially now that we know that Gabe Kidd is targeting the global title. Like, to me,
I think it's clear.
That says Finlay's got to go after the big belt. And has to have an actual chance to do it. Otherwise, you've got a weird dynamic in Bullet Club War Dogs, and that may play out also. But I think that to me means Finlay needs to be established at the next level up to leave space for Kidd to be at the white belt level. It all sort of lines up. I mean, either way, I think David Finlay lost up. He's gonna move up the card.
Sure. And
I think that's great. I think it's perfect. I think he's ready for it. I think he's the perfect New Japan Cup level winner. So, if we're looking at the first half of the year here, I think New Japan Cup, it's David Finlay's to take and win. And I just don't think they headline Ryogoku with two foreigners, which leads me to believe that somehow a Japanese wrestler has to get the title. And he's right there.
He is indeed right there. Did we just talk ourselves into this? Is this?
I talked myself into it as soon as I saw him win that Rambo. Actually, probably before.
Because it's a good plan. It's a good plan.
I just think it would land with everyone, and there are very few plans in pro wrestling that land with everyone.
Yeah, North American fans Japanese fans, I think everyone would be happy with a little Goto run. I think one last thing I just want to talk about about the Wrestle Kingdom show, because I think amidst it all, one of the things not a lot of people, one of the matches a lot of folks aren't talking necessarily a lot about is the Iwatani Azumi match for the IWGP Women's Championship. Or at least when I hear talk about it, it's like, it's too short. Well, it's sort of short.
I have Stardom stats and info the same way I have New Japan stats and info now. That match was like bang average length for a Stardom singles match.
First and foremost, correct. And second of all, like this, I thought that match ruled. Like that was my first, like the guys like to say, notebook match of the night. That was my first one. I was like, holy shit, this rocked. Like,
yep.
I look, and you can compare with what happened later on in the show. An 8-9 minute sprint, something like that, right? 8 to 9 minute sprint where you're just like, action, action, action. These girls are going, and it's good, and it's hard. They're dropping each other on their heads versus a 44-minute main event where I'm like, let's go,
Like, we peaked at 28, okay?
So, like, I can't get into the mind space of I'm disappointed because this match was short because this was a tremendous effort by both. They maximized every second that they had. I would have much preferred the main event to be that. Like, instead of a 44-minute drawn out thing, they go 10 minutes, but Jesus Christ, like they're throwing everything at each other. I would have been 100% okay with that. And the point being is that, yes, it's like, it was what, like the second, third match from the top, something like that, or from the bottom, I mean. And
second.
And we knew it was going to be short because all New Japan women's matches have all been under 10 minutes, I believe, or around.
Right.
Yeah. But holy shit, like they just,
it was great.
It was great. It was really, really great from the get-go. And is actually like the tent pole of the show, where it's like I felt like the first half of Wrestle Kingdom was really, really good. I was really into it. I liked the 4-way match for the TV title as well. I was like, okay, this show was off to a great start. And then things just slowly started to not live up. It was like the reverse card that you wanted.
It was sort of classic Wrestle Kingdom pacing, though, and just like I always know you're gonna get 3 matches in the first hour of Wrestle Kingdom. Like, you're gonna get 3 matches, and then maybe you're gonna get 2.5 in the next hour, 2 and then 2, right? Like, that's sort of the general layout of the timeline. But with all that said, I thought that match was tremendous. And there are great songs that are 3 minutes long that make you feel the same as any other great song, and there are great songs that are 9, 10, 12, 15 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And they also make you feel. And that's how you have to look at this stuff. It's the story that they wrote. And they wrote the story in 8.5 minutes instead of 15. And it was probably potentially better off for it. And I know people just want their favorites on their screen. I totally get that. Or that. Whatever they're most invested in, right? And there's a lot of people that are very invested in Stardom, women's wrestling, Joshi, however specific you want to get, Mayu and Azumi for that matter. Like, but this match was, I think, exactly what it needed to be to highlight what they're really, really good at, what these 2 wrestlers are really good at. And I think they wrote it perfectly. It was exactly what it needed to be.
I agree.
And again, pretty much bang average on like the length of a Stardom singles match. I mean, they don't do a ton of big long epics, and when they do, you almost always know it's going to go to a draw, which is also frustrating.
Isn't most, like, there's a time, like, just the 20-minute time limits in Japan, in
mostly
Joshi matches, right? Isn't it 20?
Mostly,
I think.
Most of the time, yeah.
Or is it? And then it's like 30 minutes for title matches. Like, okay,
yeah,
it's like.
But either way,
Because
Most of them land around 10.
Yeah, because they're expected to go faster because they're
Mhm.
smaller, they're quicker. So
Yeah.
you're
It's
expecting faster action. That's the basis appeal of Joshi is that's the main difference is that it will go faster because
right.
because the women are smaller than guys, faster, more agile. So the action's going to be fast paced.
It's also just it's their differentiator,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And it holds attention better.
yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. Yeah, and I think that match was really a standout, and it was the best women's match on a Wrestle Kingdom yet.
That's
I mean, I don't even think that's debatable.
I don't think so
Um,
either.
it
I
was
don't
it
think so
was
either.
and it was tremendous. I am not super involved in that community or in that world, but I watched that match and thought to myself that I could watch more of that. So, yeah, and again, the numbers are the numbers. It was what you could expect. Maybe people wanted them to get to 10 minutes, but what's another 90 seconds?
It was fine. It was very good. Anything about Wrestle Kingdom you'd like to touch on before we move on to Dynasty a little bit?
I don't think so. And obviously we've dipped our toe in the Dynasty thoughts too.
We've
Yeah,
been going back and forth, but maybe on some specific
sure.
things. Look, we've talked about slightly Kenny Omega and Gabe Kidd. I just wanted to circle back really quick when we were talking about Gabe Kidd. You said you were a day one Gabe Kidd guy, so was I. There's one thing that I will, and I know Gabe Kidd is not everyone's cup of tea, but and I understand why. The thing is that I can see why. I absolutely get why, but like when he debuted with the War Dogs last year, right? When he was with Bionic Commando, what was his name?
Oh, Alex Coughlin.
Alex Coughlin. And
Commando. Nice.
well, and
Yeah,
and they I know that wasn't the gimmick, but and they were throwing tables around and so on and so forth, and they were just he was bringing such an energy to this New Japan product, which felt very stilted, because they were finding their footing, because the new guys were still extremely new guys. They were still very new still, and Kid always had like this energy, this passion, this fire about him that he wore on his sleeve, and maybe lacked a little self-control at some points, but nonetheless had something that I was like throughout this entire roster that was before us. I was like, it was so refreshing and felt good. And I was like, I wish more of these guys had just a little sliver of this, had just a little more of this than just stoic and grounded. I just want guys with some fire. And he wasn't perfect, but there's a lot of stuff that I enjoyed out of it, and that made sense to me, that I was like, I want more of this guy. And I want this guy to be put in bigger spots, bigger feuds, and apparently some folks backstage took a liking to him because he started progressing, started being featured a little more, particularly on the US side. But nonetheless, I was like, okay, this rules. And unsurprisingly, as he grew into these roles, he's become more focused in how he delivers that incredible passion for pro wrestling that he has. Plus, with the Omega match now, he focused it into something that makes perfect sense. That he loves pro wrestling so much that he's ready to defend the company. Where for a while, he's like, fuck you, New Japan, and so on and so forth. But now it's like, no, I see the value in this because I'm not gonna get into the motivations. The point being is that he gets me to feel stuff. And that's so crucial when it comes to pro wrestling. It's like, I'm good with this. This was tremendous. And I think, look, I think it's more obvious than ever that Gabe Kidd it has the potential for big things, that big things are on the way. And I couldn't be happier, because I think this is a guy you can rely on. This is a guy now. Let's say that if you were to, like, if we start talking about Wrestle Kingdom, as opposed to this year, where it's like, if not Shota Umino, who?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to ask me the same question in the same context, I'd be like, well, Gabe Kidd.
Sure.
Hell,
Why
I
not?
wouldn't be surprised if he won the G1 this year.
It'd be interesting.
That's how motivated I am about this. This is how I'm feeling it, man. I'm really feeling it.
The lion mark on the trunks, shorts, whatever. The lion mark on the gear blew my fucking mind.
Mm-hmm.
Can I curse on here?
Yes, absolutely.
In context, it blew my mind. I was like, this is a guy who will openly just trash everything New Japan, everything. If it's not the War Dogs, if it's not the people he's involved with, he doesn't care. He's not into it. He's just going to bury it under the earth. And this man came out in a fresh War Dogs tracksuit, which is a good look.
Yes.
I'm a tracksuit guy.
You get a fresh one every year on top of that.
Mine, I'm sure, is somewhere over the Pacific or right now, hopefully. But he comes out in the tracksuit. He's got his boys with him. It's a semi-main event, but that dude doesn't care where it is on the card. His family's in the building. He was clearly motivated in his interviews leading up to it. I mean, just a tremendous character work. And then he comes out and basically says, I'm defending New Japan as a member of the Bullet Club that is here to hate New Japan.
Yep.
And he doesn't, what took precedent to Gabe Kidd and to his character, the character of Gabe Kidd, was the honor of wrestling where he wrestles, and against someone who left them behind. And it's almost the same story that they tried to tell with Will Ospreay, but it hit harder because of Gabe's alignment. I mean, his alignment with Bullet Club. And like it brought out a lot of emotions from some folks that have a louder voice than I do. It was a moment though. Yes. And it was one of those moments with pro wrestling, and like you said it perfectly, like it made you feel, right? And we were talking about it, I think in a small group. Who else has that in them? And I think a lot about this stuff in the arts in general. The willingness to be the artist that you want to be it music, film, writing, pro wrestling. I think these are all wonderful art forms. And the willingness to be the boldest, the Andy Warhol of your world is gone. Mm-hmm. And it's especially gone in pro wrestling, where all these guys are either badasses or comedy acts. And there's no one who's just the character that they've built to the core, right? None of this blurring the line. Gabe Kidd, the character that you see on that screen, living. That is a living and breathing gimmick, right? Mm-hmm. And whether there's a part of his personality in that, I don't really know. I don't care. I don't want to know. I still don't want to know. It's the best part of the show to me, is when someone is so fully invested in the character that they want to be in their art form, and that in this particular case, the art form is professional wrestling. Like when you're that invested, it's going to get people to come along with you. Mm-hmm. And hell, if it didn't bring people along with them. And I think to some extent Kenny is that too.
Sure.
And Kenny's a great foil for that. Whereas someone like Will Ospreay in the Ospreay and Kenny match, that was a little more blurred line of like what of this is the real Will Ospreay, what of this is the character Will Ospreay. I would rather just see the characters get after it, and I'll figure out who's who and what's what later and who's friends backstage or whatever, right? But like when you're in front of that camera, when that red light's on, go 100%, and Gabe Kidd goes 100%, and it elicited that reaction at the beginning of the match, which then set up the match. The match was just gravy then, because they had everyone watching in the palm of their hands, and it was, I mean, it's going to be hard for something to come even close to that feeling in pro wrestling for me. And the only place I ever feel that is New Japan. And because there are no tongues in cheeks in New Japan. It is presented in a way where it allows for that feeling to exist. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love New Japan the way I do, and I think that's why some people love New Japan the way they do.
Yes.
You know, and that can get in the way of business relationships maybe.
Well, should we touch on it a little bit? Let's
have at it.
Because again, like, just as a reminder, we're recording this on the 6th, on Monday, when it was reported that well, first of all, we all thought it was a little strange because Walker Stewart said on Twitter that he was going to go at it alone, right? And everyone was
Dash.
Like, oh, isn't that interesting? For Dash, right? Exactly. So I'm going to be doing Dash all by myself. And then the show happens, and he is indeed all by himself. You've got Jeff Cobb going, and said, "Why are you alone, Walker?" I was like, okay. And then during all of this, it's reported that Chris Charlton has been suspended indefinitely for comments that he made during Wrestle Dynasty, where he did get a little passionate about his love of New Japan and maybe his dislike of a partner. Let's stop beating around the bush. He said some off the cuff remarks regarding AEW, particularly in regards to Tony Khan, calling him a money mark, all billionaires are bad, burying the Continental Classic. And he's all doing this while Rocky Romero's in the booth, who, of course, we all know that Rocky Romero is like he's the guy who connects everyone. He's office to everyone. So, and he's kind of like, he's trying to smooth things over. And Chris is going, Chris just goes hard. Like it's not as much what he said in the context, because if you just read a transcript, you might go, but it's the fervor with which it came through. Some people would use the word vitriol, right? It was very raw at the very least, to the point where Walker Stewart was like, okay, guys, he's sort of stepped.
I think he said, let's put the guns down or something like that. Down. Yeah.
Those are exactly the words he said. So a bit of a volatile situation. He's been suspended, he being Charlton. From a business point of view, I like who made the decision, like who called who, what kind of talks we had, I don't know, but like at the very least, if I'm New Japan, I'm maybe a little embarrassed. I'm a little, then again, I understand why Chris Charlton was doing it. Gabe Kidd had been building this opposition to AEW, and it had been, to be fair, even before the Kenny Omega stuff.
100%.
Like outright, like making sure that he never gets a job. I might be exaggerating.
I don't know. It's all. I mean, Gabe sticks to character.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. That's
right.
So I may be exaggerating, but that's nonetheless the viciousness that he had been attacking AEW for months at this point, right? And they did try to make a rivalry, make this a little more about New Japan and AEW. I find that Kenny absolutely didn't go as hard as Gabe did. Kenny and his promos. I always felt, you might disagree on this, but I felt like he went a little more on the, more on the, well, Gabe, you're just a schlub. You're not on my level. You're not ready for me. He did say stuff like, you wouldn't get a job in AEW, right? Because you're not good enough. But it's not as much of a New Japan sucks. It's more like, Gabe, you're just a punk, and I'm gonna beat you. And to me, like, that's just good. That's just good promo work. It's good heel work to a degree. And Chris maybe, well, not maybe. Chris absolutely got excited. He got a little overwhelmed with all of this, and probably got really excited at the Lion Mark too. And pew pew. What do you think, Chris?
Full disclosure, right? Like, Chris, I consider Chris a friend. Chris has been really great to me. I know I've been helpful to Chris historically on commentary and things of the sort. So I'm operating from a position where I cannot speak for anyone.
Sure.
I found it to be very in story. I found it to be supportive to the story to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
All the things that Chris said, I think, were things that could have come out of Gabe Kidd's mouth. And Gabe Kidd in that moment was the representative of New Japan Pro Wrestling against essentially a representative of All Elite Wrestling. And I, the commentary throughout the show was sort of, it wasn't really an AEW versus New Japan show, is sort of the thing. But that moment was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. They've done this before with Noah, where they were actually able to like build a rivalry with the Noah shows, and both companies were clearly in on it. And you had the Noah commentators were rooting for Noah like a homer would, right? And I think that was sort of the approach that Chris was taking. Was that like, in this moment, I'm the representative at the table of New Japan, where Rocky, who has spent most of his time recently, at least in front of the camera, appearing for AEW. Yeah, and CMLL for that matter, for the companies that were not New Japan on this show. So I think that there was maybe an unspoken assumption that was part of they could trade some jabs,
which is fair.
and it was a moment, and I think that, and I don't know, I have mixed feelings about going as far as you go. Where do you draw the line? What's character? What's not character? Are the commentators characters, or is that really Chris Charlton, right? And everyone approaches that differently. Every company approaches that differently. But again, like, every person that is either seen or heard on a pro wrestling show is a part of the show. And that, I think, and there should be some communication and some thoughtfulness around being a part of a show, and who's being represented. I feel like everything that was said could have been taken as part of the story, but I could totally understand feeling otherwise.
I think that I think what made it so what's the word I'm looking for? Surprising or overwhelming, or his comments, at least at the very least shocking, okay, was that the fact, like you said, like this, there wasn't really an us versus them mentality that had been established at all during the show, as opposed to the
Noah shows
where it's like, there's a rivalry, but there was nothing throughout. And then all of a sudden, now we flip the switch, and Chris gets really angry. Well, angry. He gets, invested, passionate, and it sort of comes out of nowhere. And I think that's one of the maybe that's the thing, is that it caught everyone off guard so much. And again, like I know you have a good relationship with Chris, and honestly, I have no issues with Chris Charlton whatsoever. I think he's a great color commentator. He just comes out of nowhere with all of these comments, which kind of read like a Reddit post, also, where you're kind of like, well, this isn't really high level discourse. This is kind of like the worst level of discourse that we're going through. But that's, again, that's super subjective. Okay, I can appreciate that.
Sure.
But I legitimately think that it just caught everyone off guard so hard, and you're like, whoa, that probably fed into the reactions that probably led to the suspension, where people were just like, this, because I also heard people say, well, he's doing the heel act. Well, no, Chris Charlton's not a heel, and there's no heel act if he's defending the company that's hosting the show. It's like that's not a heel commentator move. If he was sticking up for AEW, then you'd be like, now isn't this weird that the guy who's employed by New Japan, which is also hosting the show, that set up all the logistics and whatnot, isn't it interesting that their commentator is sticking up for the other guys? Now that's a heel move, but like that doesn't even stick. He's not being a heel here. He's being the home team guy, which again, I understand,
Yeah. It's a hard one to discern. I don't think we really know who feels what either. No. Right. Especially at this point, there's not been a lot of conversation on the record about anything. So we can
only speculate, we can only
and I'm not, that's not my lane or my role. My lane and my role is to, reach out when a show's on the way up and see if they need my stuff, or if there's something else I can be helpful with. So, Chris wears a lot of hats for New Japan. So what I will say is that, I hope that the only hat that he doesn't get to wear maybe for a little while is the commentary hat, because anything you see that is English language for New Japan is probably crossing Chris's desk in one way or another. So he's a hardworking guy. He's passionate about what he does. And part of that's how we got to where we are. And I do think, but I truly think commentary across the two shows was focused and really on. Yes. It felt really good. I think Walker was tremendous throughout the card, and Chris has really come into his own as a commentator too. So, I think it'd be a shame to break up what has become a really good duo, really good and professional duo, because they bring something totally different to the table. But I do, I think, again, Chris wears a lot of hats and does a lot for New Japan. And his role there is very dynamic, and commentary is sort of, I can understand that he probably enjoys it, but I do think it is, it's the most visible, but maybe the least weighted role that he carries. So I think as long as you keep seeing English content coming out from New Japan, I think Chris is probably doing okay. But I think he's probably very thoughtful about what happened and how he can rectify it. So, because he's a good person that cares deeply about what he does.
I think like indefinite suspension is a little heavy-handed, if you ask me. No, but
who knows what the truth of it all is too. So.
What I'm, of course, like that could be just reported to a reporter, and they're just
to
like,
Dave,
they just run with it. So that's one thing, whatever the penalty is, whatever the punishment is what I'm trying to say. I hope it's not too harsh. I'm with you, and I hope he comes back. I legitimately do. I hope he comes back to commentary. Regardless. So, look, and maybe by the time, again, we're talking about this on the 6th of January. Maybe by the time this airs, there'll be a whole other level of this that will have occurred, or hopefully not, and everything will just resolve nice and quietly.
Sure.
And we can just
it's probably going to be a quiet season for Chris on commentary anyway. He probably would have done the Corkins for the New Beginning shows, and that's about it. Until New Japan Cup. So maybe we won't ever really know.
And that would be fine too.
It is okay. It's okay to not know things.
We've gotten up and down quite a bit. The Dynasty card, like as far as matches go and certain people. One guy we haven't talked about is Dave Finlay, who I thought had a stellar weekend. And I think there's a handful of guys, I think you can count them on one hand, number of guys who performed on both days and who you can say, yeah, these were MVPs. These guys delivered, over-delivered. But I think most of all, I feel like the weekend that Dave Finlay had in both of his matches was kind of it's weird. It's as if a lot of people suddenly became familiar with his work. They're like, hey, this guy's not so bad, despite having a reputation coming into this as being a guy that is a little lackluster, doesn't have the charisma. Why is he the leader of Bullet Club, etc., etc. And despite the fact that he had a very, very good G1, performance-wise, I thought he was super solid. Now a lot of people are like, hey, this Dave Finlay guy, he ain't half bad, isn't he? Like there's a lot of stories coming around happening this weekend, but I think the story of David Finlay opening some eyes is a big one. What do you think, Chris?
I think all I asked of Dave Finlay was that he get Brody King up for a powerbomb, because I think I said that on a couple of the preview shows that I did end up getting to do over the week leading up to Wrestle Kingdom. I was like, all I really want is for David Finlay to get Brody King up for a powerbomb. And by saying that, I meant it's going to show people where he's at.
Right.
Because that's his style. His style is sort of this surprising power wrestler. Mm-hmm. And it's a cool lane to be in New Japan. And Brody King's a big man. Tsuji's a big dude. And Finlay threw him around like a rag doll.
Fantastic.
And it was very cool. And even in a loss, Finlay ended up looking great. And then he comes back and has another neat match with Brody King and gets him up for a powerbomb from the ground. Like, not a use the ropes powerbomb. He did that once too, but he got him up. And David Finlay must have the strongest core of any man I've ever known. And I know he's a Finlay, right? So like we know what the build looks like, right? Yeah. But like that was impressive, and it showed everyone really what you can expect from David Finlay, which is like brutal power wrestler. He's not a counter wrestler like Jay White. He's not a creative guy using, Gato to win his matches like Heel Okada and some other stuff like that. Like he's just a badass. And that's sort of the War Dog thing. The War Dogs could so easily babyface themselves by just like running roughshod, but in defense of New Japan or something, like we saw it, right? We saw it happen with Gabe Kidd. They're all sort of that way where they're just like Maloney and Connors are kind of power juniors that are just like brutal power guys, and they're not cheaters, but they let themselves get and even Finlay, we sort of saw it this weekend, like he gets ahead of himself, and that's the story, is that like you need to contain this power and use it for the pro wrestling match, not for the brutality of it all. And so, yeah, he had a great weekend. I think we sort of mentioned it earlier. I think it's so clear to me that he's losing up. So he had to lose the white belt so he could go after the big one. And I for one, very much welcome a David Finlay run towards the top. Maybe not at the top, but towards the top. But he's a guy that delivers in big spots too. And he's really honed this character since he was sort of people really looked at him at first as like Wish.com we've got Jay White at home.
Yep.
And he's really he has come into his own and really established what this character is. And I think now's the right time to let the, light the fuse on the rocket that's been on his back for a little while now. Let's let it rip. Let's go.
I think that in a moment in New Japan's history where a lot of people are sort of questioning Gedo's booking, and spend a lot of time pointing out the holes in his game plans. The Dave Finlay game plan was absolutely a long ball that is delivering now. Like, I think he became his second, right? And we've seen it. Gedo pairs up with a guy. Well, Geto's going to take care of the guy. He's going to make sure that he gets pushed properly, and he becomes a guy, right? So this path ultimately was inevitable, but maybe didn't go as quickly as with a Jay White, for instance. Whereas Jay White, when he turned, holy shit, that didn't take long for Jay to be a top guy. Finlay took a little more time, but I think Gedo saw it. I think he realized it, but he was okay with it. Went one step at a time and moving up, changing lanes, winning the bigger belts, winning the bigger belts. We're all going to look back in retrospect on this, and we're going to be like, well, yeah, David Finlay had to beat Will Ospreay and Jon Moxley. Like, it all makes sense now, right? But yeah, like, I'm kind of with you. I think the chase for Dave Finlay will be very interesting. I think whenever he does get a shot at the world title, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, it's going to be an interesting bit of conversation because he's...
Oh yeah, there will be conversation.
Because he's going to be protected. He has been protected, and he's going to... he's just going to be seriously considered as a guy who could win the belt, which is what you want out of your challengers. And he's especially since he's a guy that's been built up from day one and protected from day one. From the minute he turned, from the minute he turned on Jay White, like, he's been a guy, slowly simmering, and here we are.
They've tried a lot of stuff before that, and this was where he landed. And Finlay's another one of those guys that had the locker room behind him, and I think still does. I think the people in that company believe in Dave Finlay, and I think he's a wrestler's wrestler.
Yes.
And I think that is that's how you get to where he is. Sometimes, right? Sometimes you get there by being the best opponent for a lot of guys. Mm-hmm. And he's got that, and now he's got a good character piece. I was in Los Angeles when David Finlay wrestled Jay White, and Finlay was supposed to be the babyface. This was 2021. Finlay was supposed to be the babyface. White was supposed to be the heel. And then we're in Los Angeles, California, and everyone loves Bullet Club, and Jay White's the most familiar guy, and Finlay had to basically flip the switch, and Finlay had to kind of work heel, and it was a weird situation. And even then that was a weird situation where the guys were sitting at home because they didn't want to sit in hotel rooms in Tokyo, and really weird times. Also feel like it was forever ago, but also yesterday. But to go from that, of being like totally uncertain and sort of flat, but a kind of a fun in-ring wrestler, to where he's at now, where I think he's really got the boys with him, and I think the crowd, the fans are behind them. The analysts in certain segments of the pro wrestling community are going to still take some time to get to know what David Finlay is now, and I think that's okay.
I think it's okay. Yeah.
I think that's okay, because I think, I don't think they'll do I think it'll be a slow build towards, maybe not slow. It'll be a medium-paced build towards the world title picture from here on in. I don't think he's going to spend much more time in anything other than a world title program, especially this year. I think he's primed and ready for it. So, and he showed it. And I think the crowd the fan base that pays attention pretty closely has seen this all sort of develop in front of their eyes. Those who parachute in, it's going to take a little more time to get them to believe in David Finlay. He might just need that one perfect promo, or match, but I think promo is probably more the lane he needs, where to really get everyone bought in. And I hope he's got the chance to do that sometime soon.
What do you think of the new champion of the British women?
I think, I do think she's on a roll. Mercedes.
Another great match.
Yeah, I think Mercedes has figured out her post WWE style that actually works in the ring. So I think she's had a really good run here. This was right up there in the lane, and she's collecting belts. She's gonna lose some big stuff soon.
Sure.
15, 16 in a row here, all singles matches, no alignment. It's interesting. It's interesting to see, because the first place she popped up was New Japan. She finally got to wrestle in the Tokyo Dome. I think is a positive.
That was a big
clearly a bucket list thing, which I think is awesome. I'm glad that happened. I'm glad that she landed on this show, and that it was purposeful. It wasn't just like a throw in a match. So yeah, she's been a really interesting trajectory after her time in WWE. So but I do think we're finally getting that great output that we've all been expecting.
That we all were expecting. It took a little while. I think she's also getting opponents that I have trouble like pinning down her style in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, she's not the most precise wrestler on planet Earth, right? When I mean,
but
sharpest, that's part of what's good. Yeah. And she's always been this way, right?
Right.
That's what works for her, right? So I think that when she gets in the ring with wrestlers who are who only know how to work with crisp wrestlers, or like, this is how you apply this in this certain way, maybe even wrestlers who are a little less experienced, I think then the flaws start showing a little more. But then when she gets with Joshi ladies who like run the gamut, do all sorts of stuff, I think she's right at home. When she starts wrestling people like Chris Statlander, who's done it all as well, who can work with that, that's fine. I believe that she's best suited with the Joshi girls than than anyone else. Like she
had really good stuff with Stephanie Victor too.
Sure. Yes, she did.
So some lucha influence. I mean, Mercedes herself clearly enjoys the lucha libre.
Yes.
I think that's a big part of what she wants to accomplish. Yeah.
She wants to do more of. And I'm not saying she's limited to, but like every time she wrestles a Japanese girl, it hits.
It's great.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I agree. Like I think we're finally getting the output from her that we were expecting.
Oh yeah, and the output, I mean, really just even if you look at the last couple of weeks, has been awesome. I mean, maybe the last month, it's like she's really hitting a stride. And who does she have next? Is she on the Battle in the Valley show? Which, God, that might have already happened by the time you put this up.
By the time I post this, it will be done. So
yeah. All right. Well,
she's really just been having really great stuff, and I really hope it continues. And I'm glad she was able to get that kind of shine and get a good match out of Mina. Not that I don't think Mina's a slouch, but I don't think
she's not renowned as one of the best, right?
So well put, Sir Samsa. That is correct.
I'm pretty good at this.
That is correct.
Yeah, she's not known as being someone that brings out the best in others. But she's a great.
It's not like you say Starlight Kid and then you go, oh yeah,
great, no problem.
It's like Mina. Oh yeah, Mina.
Yeah, great character, right? Great character work, but the match was good. I mean, it was a lot. It was honestly, it was better than I thought it was going to be. And I think some of the character work drove that on both sides, but
Sure.
they Mercedes showed up. That's awesome. You know, it's all you can ask.
Exactly. I think we went over between everything we've been talking about from the start. I think Wrestle Dynasty is pretty well covered.
Sure.
Let's move on to Dash, to New Year's Dash. Not a lot of like really newsworthy stuff happened. I was actually kind of not super impressed at the matches, though. I did enjoy a couple of them. I thought there was I thought Kenta and Taiji Ishimori versus Kushida and El Desperado was a lot of fun. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
But again, this is not necessarily a review, but there was a couple of things that were good here. One thing that stood out to me was Drilla Maloney, Dan Maloney, going heavyweight, calling out Shingo. Hell
Shingo, yeah. Let's go. I mean, look at him. Like,
I mean, you know,
that man is dense. There's no way. 220, you know, he might dip under 220 sometimes, but that man is
I wonder how many times he got fined for breaking for going overweight.
I mean, his career path was smart. I mean, he somehow turned himself into the perception of being a junior heavyweight to get himself a really solid spot in New Japan. And now I welcome Dan Maloney, Drilla Maloney, the heavyweight. I think he's a cool addition to the heavyweight division. And I mean, look at him. That Concurso picture, I was like, this man, come on. Like him and Kevin Knight. Both of those dudes. Kevin Knight's got the height too. But yeah, I mean, maybe they can waver a little bit. And I think that's sort of a neat role too. TJP's done a little bit of that too. Where you kind of bounce between the weight classes, or you're able to sort of do both. It doesn't have to be linear up. Especially at the level of push that those guys are at. With like someone like Ospreay or even Ibushi, like it sort of had to be a linear move up. Even Hiromu is doing a little bit of a dip the toe a little bit, both ways. I think that's really neat. That to me represents real combat sports. Yes. And I think they could do more of that. So yeah, hey, and him and Shingo, they're probably gonna kick ass. I mean, like they're gonna have a good time.
Here's the thing, like you're like, yes, I'm going heavyweight, and I'm calling out Shingo on my on my
Shingo's sort of the
party.
Yeah, and on that, even though it was almost 6 years ago now, Shingo is sort of the last guy to go heavyweight.
Sure.
From junior, which was kind of a stretch to begin with, but you come from Dragon Gate, you kind of got to start as a junior. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone else who like truly went up. And Shingo's first opponent was Kojima.
But wasn't ELP? ELP was a junior.
ELP, yeah, ELP. Yep, he might. Yeah, I guess he's technically the most recent to do it. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, linearly. He sort of went straight up. He was in the Best Super Juniors and then G1.
And then he did G1 the same year.
Yeah, and I do think
he just ate a lot of carbonara over the summer.
I mean, that happens. So yeah, I'm into it. I don't know. I sort of like the War Pups situation though. I don't know. Do people actually call them the War Pups? I do. Him,
first time
Drilla Maloney. Yeah, Drilla Maloney and Clark Connors are the War Pups, not the War Dogs.
Okay.
But I think that's been a good act. So I sort of hope that's not totally over. But yeah, and I don't think Drilla's gonna demolish Shingo by any means, but I think they might have a banger.
They might have. Look, I mean, what do you kind of want out of a new year in New Japan in any promotion? You kind of want some fresh stuff, right? So straight off the bat, that's really interesting. There was as far as the matches they're setting up. Oiwa and Yoshihashi was
that was a brawl.
Like if you were to tell me, like just announce, oh yes, on the next card, New Beginning, we've got Ryohei Oiwa and Yoshihashi in a special singles match. I'm like, but the brawl they had, and they were doing the chops and everything.
Yep.
And I was looking at it, and more I'm like, okay, I'm into this. I'm actually excited to see this match. Like that's going to be really good.
Well, and the story is clearly Chaos versus TMDK, and so
Sure.
they're all gonna pair off, and that's the pair. And honestly, it's kind of a neat pair. I'm into it.
I'm into it
And
too.
but put Oiwa in the ring with someone who's established and has a long track record of kind of building an emotional match. I think that'll be really interesting to see if Oiwa can leverage that.
Got any thoughts on where they're going with the TJP Jeff Cobb tension? Are they just going
United Empire is
are they
such
just
a
going to kiss? Are they just do all they need to do is kiss them too?
United Empire is in such a weird spot
Mm-hmm.
because they really are floundering without a leader, and TJP has said he wants to be the leader, and Jeff Cobb is sort of dumped on that, and like just little quips here and there. I think it's good that they're paying it off somehow, and maybe United Empire without a leader is not a good thing. Maybe someone needs to step in, right? And maybe either one of these dudes is going to step in, or one of these guys is going to get bounced. And it's contract season. We all know it. So maybe someone's got something else going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always notable when people in the same unit are gonna potentially get after each other.
Well, someone else who's got something else going on. Someone who has something else going on is Kenta, right? He lost.
Yeah.
He lost today. In the tag match, it was pinned, actually, I should say. But then it was later put on Twitter that, he was wrapping up with New Japan, and he's heading back to Noah. How about that?
I think if someone can get serious Kenta back, I think they should.
I like the match with Keno. I don't know if you watched it. I like the match.
I did. Oh yeah.
I like the match with Keno a lot.
That's what I mean. Like Kenta showed up
Yeah.
as serious Kenta,
Yeah.
not speed walking Kenta, or backstage interview Kenta.
Yeah.
So yeah, and honestly, like Kenta's career is clearly winding down. He had a pretty fun run in New Japan, and maybe Noah's where he should. Maybe that's where he's most valuable to pro wrestling as a whole.
I mean. I think this is a guy who just looks at the landscape. He's like, oh well, look at all the new guys here, and New Japan clearly has a vision for them, even though they're not like enforcing it. He's never ever going to challenge for a top belt.
Oh, he had his arc ended the same time Naito's arc sort of ended, which was with that amazing New Beginning 2020 match.
Mm-hmm.
That was something, and the he had all his New Japan moments.
So I think
he spent most of his time in Defy last year. I mean, like I always think people moving on is fine.
I think so too.
Especially in a situation where Kenta can do better work for pro wrestling as a whole in Noah, given his history there, and just sort of what Noah has going on. Kenta, you could put the GHC on Kenta, and I don't think anyone would bat an eye.
One would complain.
Better than putting it on half the dudes they put it on in the last 18 months.
For real. Interesting. No Chase Owens, no sign of Chase Owens. Not even in the Rambo. Not
didn't get Dash. Our token.
I was expecting him to show up on Dash. I'm like, but no.
Yeah. I expected. I don't know anything. I expected him to pop up somewhere because every year, right around January, the beginning of January, you get that Twitter picture of Chase Owens in an airline seat.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't want to say New Japan's like thinning out the roster, but I think there's a certain extent of like. We are in a new generation.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that. I kind of feel like they're always going to be like I kind of feel like Chase Owens will always have a spot there regardless because he's always been dare I say I want to say company guy, but that's not exactly what I mean though.
Sort of the epitome of a good hand.
Yeah, like reliable.
And he's had a couple of cool spots, and he's done some. He's been don't want to even call him a featured act, but he's been an act.
He's been an act.
He's been an act on the show. He got a win over Tanahashi, and got some little G1 moments, but nothing ever paid off anything. It was just sort of a thing that happened. Yeah, Chase is, honestly, as kind of the multi-man tag thing goes, I mean, like, there was a year I was tracking finishes and like who was involved, and Chase was in like every finish of every match, whether they were winning or losing. He was just in there at the end of matches. It was just that was his role, and honestly, that's a cool role.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think he'll probably pop up somewhere,
It's just surprising.
or he'll pop back up for if they do like a humongous New Japan Cup, he'll be in the first round again. Like I don't know. Maybe he's not finished up. Maybe it's just they didn't have a spot for him. I mean, Bushi had a special mask made for like this weekend and didn't appear on anything either. So
no, he was on Dash today. He was on Dash.
He was on Dash today, but he wasn't on Dynasty or
the big shows. No.
Yeah, he wasn't on the Dome shows. So, and this is the first year that Bushi didn't pop up on the Dome shows. They did sort of pare things down a little bit in the sense of the get them on the card type stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, no, I think that's okay. That's a healthy approach.
Another guy that I thought that if I was curious was absent today was Kevin Knight, considering that Kushida was on the card.
Kushida was going, he was setting up the Never title match thing.
Sure. Which is happening at Battle in the Valley, which we won't talk about because by the time this comes out, it'll already be out and we'll look like goofs. So
yes,
I don't want. I'm goof shielding us, Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You're a pro's pro. We're in what does Tony Khan call it? The time cop.
Yes, we're in the time cop thing. Yes.
Yeah. Whatever the time cop thing is, we're doing it. Yes, Kevin Knight absent. There has been some news about his contract status that it's up in the air. I hope he. I would love for him to stick around another year and really get some sort of cool run out of him. And he's done some cool stuff for sure. But who knows, right? I don't know what people's personal priorities are. But he's a dude. He's a dude who's got a look for sure. And he's really, we've watched him develop on the New Japan side to being a really good pro wrestler. So I'm hopeful for his future wherever that is.
I'm surprised you haven't mentioned Josh Barnett yet from the Dash show today and his incredible performance.
I mean, yeah, right. Well, I love that he got it. He mixed it up with Bolton Oleg. I mean, that was you want to see stuff like that.
Yes.
I want Oleg to be in. I want Oleg to be in all the prime spots because he's a cool dude.
He really is.
Cool dude, cool recruit, cool story, and I think he's really put it together too. But yeah, yes, I know.
It's not as much because what I thought actually was fine, and I thought it was compelling. It was good, for what it was. Yeah. It was fine. It's just like it's Josh Barnett, where then after he's asking for the mic. Of course he is.
Of course he is.
Of course he's asking for the mic. And
yes.
To put over Bolton Oleg, but put over by saying, "Yeah, I helped you reach this spot, and I'll help."
But we all knew this was gonna happen, right? Like this was the script. Like I think Joe and Rich said it on an instant reaction. They were like, "Oh, here's what's gonna happen. They're gonna do the match. Oleg's gonna lose, which whatever. But and Josh Barnett's gonna talk about how great he is, how great Oleg is.
Oleg is, but by the way, he's also gonna squeeze in how great he is by complimenting. Nice little, just like you did with Claudio at that one pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Was it at Forbidden Door? I think it was at Forbidden Door. Right?
It was one of the Forbidden Doors. Yeah. Such is the life of Josh Barnett. I mean, that's what you get. It was interesting though, and it put Oleg in a spot. And I like that.
I think we haven't been getting enough Bolton Oleg recently, to be perfect.
Yes, because he's still holding that Never 6-man title somewhere. Maybe they lost the belts again.
Yeah. Let's say do you have any other Dash thoughts? I mean, it was practically a nothing show. It wasn't.
Oh, and I think my only thought is that has been my expectation of Dash. It's you don't get the shocking revelations. You had the cool moment where Kenny and Okada teamed a couple years ago.
That was fun.
But that wasn't like a mind blower, right? Dash is really just to set up New Beginning now, so they don't have to do it on the Dome.
Pretty much. So if we were to wrap this up, let's say with one of these stock, whose stock has risen and whose stock has fallen after all of this Wrestle Kingdom nonsense. I think it would be safe to say that Gabe Kidd's stock has gone way up, right?
Way up. I think biggest winner of the weekend.
I think so too. And I think I would put Dave Finlay, like if I don't want to make this into a list, but I'd put Dave Finlay at a close second.
He's right there. Yeah.
As far as because his
stock anyone who was just dipping their toe in the way people do for Wrestle Kingdom weekend, and they saw David Finlay, they have to say, okay, this is not the same guy that I was shit talking like a month ago or a year ago or whatever it is. You have to look at Dave Finlay and say like, all right, fine, you win.
Shota Umino. Where do we put?
I mean, how could you possibly say up? I mean, like he failed. There's no other way to put it. And I'll say it with the brutalest word possible. Like he was a failure this weekend.
But did he?
And Dynasty didn't help him either.
No.
That Claudio and Zack Sabre Jr. were both like desperately trying to get him to like figure it out in front of our eyes, vocally. Mm-hmm. And it comes off as shit talk or whatever, but like there was some real direction being given.
Because Zack was like, come on. I remember Zack was kicking him in the face. He's like, get up, you're in the dome. Like that's exactly what he told him.
Yeah. And like I think there's a big chunk of truth that was happening in those moments that wasn't in character. I think Shota Umino should. I think in a perfect world, Shota Umino does a second excursion, joins the Death Riders, hangs out with Jon Moxley, comes back as a whole different character, and maybe, just maybe, then he will have something worth squeezing with New Japan. It was the Naito path, right? He had to go to Mexico and come back as a different dude again. It's not out of the question, and I think it's very clear that that's sort of necessary if he's ever going to get anywhere, or he just needs to fade away for a little while and come back strong. But I think truly I think they should consider that as an option, because there are all these connections. I was a little surprised they didn't try to sort of plant the seed on that with the Claudio match.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have been the perfect time to be like, come with me. And then, have him kind of fall off for a little bit. But, there would be a lot of...
He likes being in the United States. Shota does. He likes being in
the anytime if he can get closer to Disney World or Disneyland, he's a happy man. That's what I've heard. So
he really likes it.
He does. And and honestly the US likes him. Wants to like him.
Yeah, absolutely. The American crowds love him because of the connection with Moxley. Geez,
with the Moxley thing, which was one of the best stories I've ever seen. And I desperately want that story to pay off.
I agree. What about Yota Tsuji? How do we feel? I kind of feel I feel his stock has gone up a little bit because I thought he had a really good match with Finlay. Yeah, very good match. I considered that match to be my favorite of Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that.
And I don't think it's a hot take either. And I thought that he came off as a star with Jack Perry. We didn't talk about that match, and we really don't need to.
Yeah.
I like it might not be like a skyrocketing up stock, but it didn't stay neutral. I think he elevated it a little bit. I'm in a little better spot. Like I don't hate Yota Tsuji, but whenever people say, why are they doing this with Shota Umino when they could be doing with Tsuji? I'm like, well, Tsuji he has some stuff to prove. That the difference is that Tsuji has such a presence and a natural charisma that I think a lot of people are excusing it. But I'm at a point where I'm wondering what the career trajectory, for Tsuji is going to be. Mm-hmm. If he's going to unlock some kind of physical potential that we haven't seen yet, or if he's just going to be a vibes guy, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, right? Like you can have a wonderful career being a vibes guy in pro wrestling. That's fine.
Absolutely.
But the more things progress with old huge Suge, I'm kind of like, yeah, I think vibes guy might be his plan.
Yeah, it's almost one of those like, well, I guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And again, that's okay. If it were just the David Finlay match, I'd say way up. Because I thought that match was wonderful. I think Suji. I don't know if Suji can be the leader in a match.
Well, he had a really good opportunity on Dynasty to do that, and
yeah, it didn't land.
No.
He's maybe opponent dependent, but I think he got the belt, right? Now he's got to do something with it. He's got to do something with it. And that's an important belt. We're not talking about the one of the lower stuff, right? Like this is a real one.
Yeah.
And maybe he's gonna have a big long reign that really establishes what he is. So
might be another sink or swim type of situation here.
Yeah, I mean, and Suji gets the benefit of this belt, not having to go to main event, right? He can live in the semi-main or the headline Kobe versus headline Tokyo Dome.
Sure.
And Suji's a little bit older, and he's had a little bit of a cleaner trajectory forward. But I think Suji's big story is going to end up with Uemura. Those two are attached at the hip, and once Uemura's back, I think maybe we'll really see. There's part of me that hopes that there's a big program between those two, maybe even like a big trilogy type thing, where they can pay off that long term we were both young lions together storyline. So, and I know everyone's kind of waiting with bated breath to see what's going on or when Uemura pops back up.
Zack Sabre Jr. About him.
Tough to say. I'm pretty neutral on the weekend as a whole. I think he was a credible main eventer in the Tokyo Dome, so you can't take that away from him, and that's incredible. And I think the work that he did leading up to that to draw some emotion and some both from the fans and from Shota Umino, I think was really incredible. So he really did build that up. The matches I think were very good. I do think 43 minutes was too long, and that was significantly longer than Zach's longest match ever. I mean, Zach's longest match ever was something like 34 against Okada. Like, add 10 minutes add 25% to a match like that is tough, especially with a guy unestablished on the other side. And then the Ricochet match was about what I expected it to be.
Sure.
So I'm neutral. But I'm pleased that he came out of the weekend as the champion, because I think that the path forward with Zach as the champion is a lot better than the path forward with either Umino or I guess theoretically Ricochet could have come out of as champion. So I still think Zach is a good he's a good person to have your top title on right now.
I agree, and I'm kind of with you on the neutral side. Like I don't think it like. His stock didn't go up, but his stock was already very high. So it's like, So you're like, okay, well, it stays as such. That's not bad.
It's okay. It's fine. You hold stocks like that.
Yes, exactly.
You don't sell. No one's selling Zack Sabre Jr. right now.
No, I think everyone saw that he did everything in his power to get Shota Umino to do something. I think that was transparent. And everyone saw it, and everyone appreciated it. And if anything, maybe that may have raised some stock in some people.
And he, truthfully, with me, he almost got there. Like he almost got me to think Shota can do this thing. But the third act of that match, I mean, it really was a 3-act match. Like the middle was all about trying to get people behind Shota, and then the end was like the finisher sequence. The middle part, you could see the effort, and then the last act of that match, you could sort of see like it didn't happen. They didn't have to pivot in the ring and call it for Shota. Like they needed to leave that belt right on Zack Sabre Jr. and just end the match.
Did. Yeah. No, there was not that groundswell, that moment where like, hey, we can't finish this match if Shota Umino doesn't win. It just it didn't happen. Anyone else on your side that you think should be pointed out that you are higher on or lower on?
It's ironic because of the situation with Doki and El Desperado, but I think the junior division as a whole really has stepped up and to be a really relevant piece to the puzzle at New Japan. And I think personally my stock of the Young Bucks is up because I think they gave a lot of effort in that match. I think they looked really good. So I'm back on board. The Young Bucks are probably the best tag team of my lifetime, maybe of ever.
Mm-hmm.
But they showed up in a way that I haven't seen them show up in a little while. Yeah, so it was cool. It was very cool to see, and I think it's neat to see the Bucks and Kenny show up in the Tokyo Dome and act like they never left.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it was more than a throwback, right? With the music and the gear, it was really like it was like, yeah, we're also going to come back to our roots, or basically how we wrestle, and that legitimately was tremendous. And I agree with you, and I'm glad you brought it up. If there's someone stock that went up and probably needed to go up too, quite frankly.
Yeah, people are pretty sour on that last AEW run, even though it was all, it's all character driven stuff there, especially. But yeah, they are right there, and I curious to see what their trajectory looks like here.
Yeah, we barely even talked about it, but they're champs. I mean, they're gonna have to come back to defend. One would assume
heavyweight champs.
I know.
So yeah, it's good. It's good to put the belts on the Young Bucks.
I agree.
Why not?
100%. I love the Jacksons. I have always loved them. It's fine.
I mean, you always know that they can. It's just sometimes it's a matter of if they will. Exactly. But if you put them on a pay-per-view, anything that's not going to get a commercial break, you're going to get a damn good match out of them.
Absolutely. Concurred. Well,
yeah, that's it, I think.
Okay. Look, we've covered a lot of ground.
Real quick. Walker Stewart. Up.
Sure.
Great weekend from Walker. I mean, just really on everything. Awesome job. Awesome job from Walker Stewart. Not that I'm not a believer in his talent. He's an extremely talented dude, but he is so now a part of the New Japan product. And I think that should be noted. Great stuff.
I agree. He even did tremendous work. He was the lead on the Stardom Queendom show, the Dream Queendom show, which I watched. Which I wasn't aware of, and then I was like, oh, pleasant surprise, and that's always a good thing too, where you're like, oh, it's him. This is nice. I think he improved so much throughout the year, but as I think it was the flagship guys who were mentioning it, like he's been taking indie bookings, like he's been working wherever he can work, and he comes prepared. Everywhere he goes, he's got his notes, he's got everything in his mind, he's ready to go. He's not just sitting down in a hoodie and then making jokes to pop the guy in the booth, right? He's doing he's applying his craft. And I can't remember at what show, but he referenced, when was it, like he referenced something about being put in a situation where you're not ready for it. Like he said it, I can't remember when he said it, but he maybe it was even at the Stardom show. I don't quite remember, but someone said something about not being about being thrown into a position too soon, kind of thing. And he said, "Oh, I can completely relate with being put in a position that you're not ready for." Like that's exactly what he said. And I was like, man, that's a lot of self-awareness. That's a lot of self-awareness. And I think he's done a lot of growth. And I think he's off. He doesn't hang out on Twitter as much either, which is a good thing.
Smart man. The smartest of us have deleted Twitter. Yeah. The second smartest of us post and mute, that is my objective, is always post and mute.
Post and mute. But he was absolutely phenomenal throughout the entire weekend. He's the voice now. He truly is the voice. And and he's stupid young, so we're not done listening to him. So
No, he's going to be around somewhere for a very, 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 very long time, I think. So
I think so too.
I'm glad for it.
For sure. So unless you have anything else, Chris, I think we're gonna wrap this segment up.
We did not hit our time. We did not hit our time mark, but hopefully people don't think we went as long as Shota and Zach.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, but hopefully we were a little more entertaining. Chris, are we friends now, Chris?
Oh yeah, I think we've been friends.
No, I know, because I did the joke at the start, and I just
yeah.
I'm trying to do a full circle thing, and it's not working out. But
it worked.
Thanks, Chris, for joining me. Do you want to let people know where they can follow you and follow your work?
Any social media, at the Chris Samsa. So put a "the" in front of my name. There's 2 S's in the middle. That's kind of it.
And sportofprowrestling.com.
Sportofprowrestling.com. Sitting dormant as usual. Until something big comes along, we've got some plans, but I'm a tell me what you've done, don't tell me what you're gonna do kind of guy. So we're not gonna talk about what I'm gonna do.
God, there are so many people who could learn so much from that. That's a life lesson. I swear to God.
In my regular day-to-day job, I work with a lot of people who are trying to get the next step in their career, and that is my number one interview advice. Is if you're interviewing for a job, tell people what you've done. Don't tell them what you're going to do. They will not believe what you're going to do.
It is so like social media. People go, I've got, I'll be doing this, and I've got this big list of things coming up, and you're like, I don't care. Just show me.
Cool. That's awesome. I hope your friends and family are really proud of the work you're not showing off. Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Warren.